our presenters. Okay, so we are so fortunate to have Iwan Nayak and Brianne Curry with us. Iwan is a team lead within the Capacity and Change Management team at the Lean and Continuous Improvement Office within the Cabinet Office of Ontario. With a black belt in Lean Six Sigma and Project Management Professional Certification, he spearheads Lean capacity building and change management initiatives and coaches managers in Lean management principles across the Government of Ontario. Brianne Curry is a senior business analyst with the Capacity and Change Management team in Lean and Continuous Improvement Office, Cabinet Office of Ontario. She's a Lean Six Sigma black belt and has 7 years of experience applying Lean with the Ontario public sector, including leading teams through organizational changes and Lean process improvements. Without further ado, I will pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Talia.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone to co-creating change in public service with lean change management principles. This session revolves around the question if lean culture is embedded in an organization, are traditional change management strategies even necessary? So as Talia mentioned, I'm Ivan Nayak, joined by my colleague Brianne Corey. We are from the Capacity and Change Management Unit in the Lean and Continuous Improvement Office. Capacity and Change Management Unit works to increase the capability of thousands of teams throughout Ontario Public Service to use lean and continuous improvement principles to improve their processes and systems to deliver value to our end users. We also provide guidance to teams to use lean change management principles to manage their change initiatives using workshops, lean certifications, and group coaching. And I'd like to thank Results Washington for giving us an opportunity to share and also learn about the various lean transformation efforts happening across North America. So before I begin, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge that we are all on lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples. They continue to care for this land. They continue to shape North America today. And I want to show my respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they are still relevant today. And with that, I hand off to Bree.
Thanks, Ivan. I am just going to take control. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon from here in Ontario. So some learning goals that we have for you today are after this session, we want you to be able to walk away with an understanding of what lean change management is. And there's essentially 4 different stages in a lean change management cycle that we're going to be taking you through, as well as what the role of a lean change agent is. We'll give you some examples of how lean change management techniques can be applied so that you can maybe walk away and be able to apply them to your teams. And with that, there's a little bit of a call to action that we have at the end of our session for you to maybe take some action in your own teams. So what is lean change management? So lean change management is a streamlined approach that applies lean principles to effectively implement organizational changes, optimize processes, of course, and achieve desired outcomes. Essentially, it is feedback driven. It really focuses on engaging the people of your organization in the change initiative and approach in order to gain buy-in and alignment across your organization as you're moving through incremental changes. So again, it's centered on feedback. It emphasizes co-creating change, and it's people first and adaptive. And it has continual planning cycles in order for you to execute on defining causes and purposes for why you're going about your changes. One of the biggest differences between lean change management is that it's a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach, where frontline staff contribute to the change and the ideas for change. So where can lean change management be applied? It can impact policies and procedures, organizational changes or legislation changes, and of course, customer or client satisfaction improvements. But what about traditional change management? I just need to move the slide ahead. So just a note on traditional change management. It tends to be more structured approach with a plan, and then you implement that plan in order to manage organizational changes. It can be more linear and phased, and it tends to be standardized for broad application. And again, that it's more top down. So this is appropriate for things like business process changes, strategic shifts, if there's like a mandate change that your ministry or I guess department is going through, sometimes with technology implementation as well, and then sometimes also cultural transformations is where traditional change management can be applied. So with that, we want to welcome you to the transformation age. And we want to introduce this notion of a lean change agent. So in traditional change management, you have maybe a change manager as the role of the person who is leading any kind of change effort across an organization. In lean change management, we have lean change agents. So we want to invite you to identify with that role and discover a little bit more about what that means. So a lean change agent is a person who is trained and skilled in using lean change management techniques to drive organizational change. They help organizations identify and address inefficiencies, improve processes, and achieve their goals through using lean. So they're responsible ultimately for guiding the change process and ensuring that it is effective, efficient, and sustainable. They work with teams, departments, and senior leaders to develop and implement new processes, tools, systems, and they enable the organization to achieve your desired outcomes ultimately. So by combining ideas from different communities, the change agent can help better understand change dynamics and shift the focus away from plan-driven approaches towards more feedback-driven approaches. So these are the 4 steps or stages of a lean change management cycle. It's laid out in a cycle, but it's important to note that you can bounce between the different phases as you progress through a lean change management effort. So generally, you tend to start with insights, and these are identifying improvement opportunities and assessing your organization's readiness for change. Then you can move into options, which again uses that feedback-driven approach in order to engage the people of your organization in the generation of ideas. Then you have alignment, and this is where you use your communication strategies and tools in order to have transparent alignment across the people of your organization and engaging all perspectives on a change. And then you move into experiments, and this is that iterative approach that you can have towards implementing changes in smaller chunks rather than bigger initiatives. These 4 phases kind of generally follow the plan, do, check, adjust, or abandon cycle of like a lean project. So that the idea is that you come up with a plan for some sort of improvement, you do that plan in more of an experiment or a testing kind of approach. You check your results and then you adjust the plan accordingly. So kind of mirrors those 4 phases as well. So we're going to take you through the 4 phases. What do each of them mean? So the first we're going to dive into is insights. We can apply lean change management by adopting insights, options, and experiments, like I mentioned. So from there, change experiments will work through the 4 stages of prepare, introduce, and review. So let's dive deeper into insights. So, what are insights? Insights are the first step of the lean change management cycle, but as I mentioned before, there's no logical starting point of the cycle. As a change agent, you're always stepping into the middle of a constantly evolving reality. So traditionally, plan-driven approaches assume that change has a logical starting point because the change project usually has a start date. And then you come up with a plan that gets created based on the snapshot of the organization at that time, and insights are generated at a certain point of time from a certain point of view. So by the time that the plan is implemented and put in place, the reality tends to shift and change, and the plan might not always apply still to the reality of the organization in the present. So, insights alternatively help organizations assess change readiness to make informed decisions about how to approach changes. So, you have an overall plan, and that's important, but you break it down into smaller chunks and you release those in stages or those changes slowly to a more adaptive and to respond to the natural shifts that happen in your organization. So how do you apply the insights phase? You often generate them through collaborative activities such as workshops and focus groups. These discussions focus on identifying topics that people are ready to explore in changes. So these could be in the form of problems or maybe curiosity of a new tool or method, or maybe a suggestion for a shift in the current status quo, essentially. So before you can plan any change, you always want to understand the current state of your organization, and every organization is comprised of people. So you really have to talk to the people to understand your organization's current state. And to do that, you can use so many different tools that are available, assessments and models to help you understand that current status. So another way to think of this is if you're familiar with the lean phases of a project, these are much like the define and measure phases of a lean process improvement project. You want to understand and define the current before you make any change. So in the insights phase, you start kind of asking yourself and asking the organization, what kind of organizational norms exist? What do you need to know before you move into experimenting? So before you even start to explore what changes could happen, you want to assess what are the conditions that we need to know about our organization to see if they're ready for experimenting even. And also assessing what kind of approach you would want to use and might work best for your specific organization. And what's your organization's natural pace of change? Is it slow? The people in your organization like to adopt things in a slower pace, or maybe they're more readily kind of wanting to move things quickly and do experiments in a faster pace. So to do this, you can use very familiar tools such as surveys, meetings, interviews, observations, either virtual or in person. And by doing or using these tools, you ultimately are defining the future changes or the conditions that your organization is in order to be ready for future changes. Sometimes you may not know how to start facilitating change, so you need to first gather feedback that will help guide you towards that next step. So we are, throughout our presentation, going to be trying to gather insights from you. And so we're going to be opening up the chat, and we want to hear from you a little bit of what you think about this. So if you just want to respond in the chat, we want to know, while considering the implementation of change within your projects, what of the following aspects in that ask yourself box, what do you find is most critical to understand your organization? Is it understanding organizational norms, understanding what you need to do before experimenting, or what approach is going to work best, what pace of change your organization wants, or maybe a new one that we haven't listed? So I'm just going to look in the chat. Okay, some are saying what change approach. Yeah, understanding norms, natural pace of change, what change approach. Okay, yeah. Okay, it looks like the norms and pace of change tend to be the most popular. All of them, yes. Yeah, so the idea here is that you want to essentially understand your organization specifically, and every organization is different. So you just want to gain insight into that readiness of your organization before you move into even generating ideas. Great, thank you for those responses. So the next phase in the cycle is options. So that was insights, and that was about gathering feedback, data from people across the organization to assess that appetite for change. But how do you determine the ideas that could address the insights that you identified? This is where the options come in. So we have, I'm going to ask for responses again in the chat. We want to know, can you recall a time when someone on your team or in your organization offered an option or a new idea, but it didn't go anywhere? Has that ever happened? Yes, all the time. And maybe you've offered an idea and didn't go anywhere. Yeah. So it's really great to come up with ideas, and usually ideas can come up quite organically in conversations. So because of that nature of ideas, if they're brought up organically, sometimes they don't go anywhere. So this is where you, as a change agent, would be able to recognize when someone offers an option, and then you would help them connect it to an insight or an improvement opportunity. So this is where that cycle isn't necessarily linear, but you can move between the phases as well. If someone's offering an opportunity, it's usually because they have some sort of appetite for change. So it's up to you as a change agent to try and identify what that idea would be connected back to for insights. What's the problem that they're trying to solve? Or what's their curiosity with this idea that they're putting forward? So how would you go about doing that? This is where you start to explore options as ideas. So we can think of this to help us improve. Another way we can think of these is hypotheses. These are common in our lean projects all the time. And we assess options by looking at their cost and anticipated impact to turn insights into actual viable options that we would want to try out. So you're generating ideas that you anticipate will respond to the insights that you generated previously, and then you apply some sort of cost and impact lenses to assess their viability for testing and experimenting. So to do this, teams work together. They come up with these ideas based on what you've learned about the current situation. And so this process involves creative thinking, discussing as a team, and making informed decisions about what steps you want to take next. So options often, but not always, like I mentioned, can come up organically in conversations like team meetings, coffee chats, lunch chats, someone posting an article in Slack or Teams. And they can come in forms of statements like, it might not be a bad idea if we try this thing. So when these kinds of ideas come up, the change agent can connect it back to a problem or an analysis of the current condition before driving or diving the idea into the next phases of the cycle. So there are many different approaches to connecting ideas to problems and vice versa. You can use tools from Lean, like 5 Whys, root cause analysis, and those are great for exploring the problems and ensuring that you linger in the problem space so that you understand the problem better and then therefore can come up with the right solutions or better solutions and better ideas. And then from the problem space, you can truly move into the option space. And that's where you start to define all aspects of your idea. So what aspects do we really mean? There are three main factors to consider, and that's cost, value, and level of disruption. And so for cost, these can be soft and hard costs. One way to look at this is what is the overall effort needed to essentially implement the idea that is going to be potentially experimented. And then value is the overall benefit to the organization. And then you assess do the benefits outweigh the costs. And then for level of disruption, you want to know this is more of a gut feeling notion, and it's often hard to quantify or really measure. But what's really important to note here is that you have some sort of assessment or notion around what that level of disruption would be, and you would draw from your insights in order to understand the organization and how you think your organization would respond to the idea. So for that cost value analysis, there are a couple different factors to think about for cost that you might not necessarily have thought about previously. Cost can come in forms like time spent working on a change. Time, of course, costs money. And then there's also the potential of developing new capabilities. So if you need to upskill or train, there could be a cost to that. And then, of course, with any new change, there's going to be a learning curve, either with you as a change agent or the various people in the organization that are going to be affected by the change. There might be a productivity drop as a result of that learning curve. So these are kind of softer costs that you might not necessarily think about and should consider in your assessment of an idea. So when you're comparing the cost and value, it's good to kind of plot them on a matrix. And this image on the slide shows the different quadrants or assessments of where your ideas could fall. Of course, if it's low to no cost, but high value, those are the quick wins and kind of no-brainers with going ahead and implementing those. If it's high cost, high value, those tend to be considered disruptors. And those are the ideas that you want to try and think about how they can be broken down into smaller incremental changes to maybe distribute the cost a little bit and still deliver that high value across the organization. So from there, you move into alignment. And this is where the communication efforts are really important as a change agent. Um, you are essentially making sure that everyone in your organization, before you go about making any kind of change, everyone understands and agrees what the change is trying to achieve. So, alignment really means that you have assessed and understand all the different perspectives of all the people in your organization, and make sure that you respond to those perspectives accordingly. So, the change agent, to do this, to achieve alignment, you talk to everyone in the organization and you build rapport, and you use humble inquiry and empathetic inquiry in order to understand those perspectives. And then, of course, if there are any disagreements or gaps, you would respond to those accordingly. So, you need to first understand what your key players and contributors are to the change, and then who's impacted. So there's going to be people who are active in helping have the change implemented or tested, and then there's the people who are affected by the change. So all perspectives need to be heard, and you need to have some sort of understanding on how those perspectives will impact the change plan. So this can include identifying gaps in understanding of what the change might be and what the experiment might be. This can be identifying disagreements around the change. And then by identifying those things, you respond with filling those gaps with some sort of communication method, whether it's continuing to have conversations with people or creating some sort of guides and communication materials. Or you dig deeper into why there's disagreement. What is the source of that? And can you work through that to achieve agreement among everyone? And you really want to achieve this before you move into the experiment phase. So drawing from the Dunning and Kruger model of change, there tends to be waves of kind of the sentiment around changes that are happening. So there tends to be a surge of excitement and momentum and confidence when changes first come about. And as we are kind of, as an organization, embarking on this new path, and people can be eager, hopeful, ready to dive in. But then as things progress, as the change starts to be really take effect, you can tend to start to go into a valley of despair. And that's where a change agent really needs to intervene and build momentum again, realign people, and use those communication methods that you use in alignment to make sure that people continue to be on the same page, agreeing and understanding what the change is about. So again, this is highlighting how that cycle isn't exactly linear. There's going to be points when you are implementing the change and experimenting where you're going to have to intervene and realign people, making sure that everyone is still on board with the change. So alignment, like I've been mentioning, really is about talking to people. It starts with those conversations, but there are some tools that you can use to make sure that the discussions translate from being conceptual into more tangible outputs. So one tool is a change canvas, which we're going to show you a little bit later on in more detail, but that's that little thumbnail there. We'll show you it bigger later on. And this can help identify potential obstacles or areas of disagreement early on and allow the change agent, you, to address them before they become bigger issues. And so by having those open conversations, honest conversations, the change agent can build trust and credibility with stakeholders, which can help create a more positive and collaborative environment as you move through the change. So I mentioned that there are different roles in the change. There's people who are contributing and people who are affected, but there's also, as per Benjamin Franklin, three kind of personas, if you will, of people in the organization with the change. So those are movers, movables, and immovables. So movers tend to be stakeholders who are fully on board, they like the change, they're actively working to make it a success. And then movables are stakeholders who are not necessarily fully on board initially anyways, and those are the people that you can persuade to support it. This is the group of people that you want to really focus your efforts on during alignment. By shifting their mindset into being movers, they can help you really rally and have influence on the rest of the organization. And then immovables tend to be stakeholders who are resistant to change or whatever change that you have come up with and want to experiment, and they're unlikely to support it. But it's good to talk about, engage these people because they often identify risks, potential fallbacks, and even help with pre-mortem or anticipated failure planning. So it's good to understand their perspective as well and kind of channel their resistance into productive planning for your change. So from there, we're going to move into experiments, and I'm going to hand it over to Iwan for this.
Thank you, Bree. So, okay. So we have heard about gathering insights, generating options, seeing if people are aligned, the stakeholders are aligned. And then what comes, the next part is experiments. So what are experiments? Just some ideas that's generated out of those options that we want to test. We don't know if they will work or not. We have some general hypothesis about if it will work. But this is where you test out. This is where you do a small pilot test of sort and see and measure what results came out of it. So at this point, you're also sort of managing the scope. So you're also looking at things that you would not try maybe in this cycle, but you will try it out later down the line based on how big of a scope of the experiment is. But before that, you sort of look at the team that you have or look at the stakeholders that you have and see if there is a culture of experimentation. So are they open to new ideas? Example could be adoption of new tools or templates. So like digital Kanban boards to improve workflow. How risk tolerant are they? So you could pilot out a small experiment with one department or a team first that accepts the risk for overall improvement across the organization. How is the data-driven decision-making skills among the team members? So could they use data to identify wasteful areas and guide lean solutions, like streamlining a lengthy process, etc. And also if they are like continuously learning new approaches, so regularly monitoring performance, learning from the data that you have gathered, and adjusting accordingly. The idea being like a team with this culture embraces trying new approaches, taking those calculated risks, learning from failure, overall encouraging that creativity aspect when it comes to lean management or change management. And once you have those ideas, the important thing about here is managing these change visually. So you put it out in front of the team and then sort of categorize into what they would like to do now, do later. Are there any experiments that they're not sure of, or would they like to completely abandon certain experiments? So again, the idea is to make the change plan visible and get everyone's feedback to co-create an action plan. And how would you know if your experiments have been successful? This is where measurements, metrics, measurements, data, these become important. So you need to choose the right methods, so such as qualitative or quantitative measures, feeding, lagging indicators, gathering surveys, feedback and opinions. If it is qualitative measure, certain if it is a quantitative measure, you could use something like a net promoter score and some leading indicators. So how would you go about showing progress towards goal? And also lagging indicators. So once you have done the experiment, what's the effect of that experiment? So again, customer satisfaction surveys, or you're asking the end users if certain experiment worked to sort of mitigate whatever pain points they had. And now we'll sort of move into the apply section of this session, where we'll sort of talk about what are some tools and templates that you could use. So along with this deck, you would also be getting two templates, and then I'll go into a bit more details about how you could go about using that with your team. So one of the very first template is a hot seat exercise. So what is a hot seat tool? So it's a technique used in lean change management to help individuals or teams overcome challenges and make progress towards their goals. How is it done? So a facilitated conversation happens where one person or a team shares whatever current barriers or problems they're working or facing, and a group of stakeholders in the same session ask questions, share diverse perspective, offer advice and solutions or options and insights. And there's a persona called as the star. So whoever's problem or pain point was selected becomes the star or and gets the hot seat in this exercise. And they are encouraged to sort of reflect on their own assumptions and biases and to explore the new ideas after listening to everybody else. So what the stages of a hot seat. So first you'll brainstorm and vote. So have 4 to 5 problems to vote on. Each person gets 2 votes. They vote whichever pain point or problem gets the most vote. Then we sort of ask everybody else apart from the person whose pain point was selected. So that person becomes the star and cannot speak while the other people or the other stakeholders are generating certain solutions. So it takes about 4 minutes or so. And then out of that insights, certain options are selected or options are generated or things to try out, things to experiment are created out of those. And as Bree mentioned previously, then we put it on a cost versus value prioritization matrix. Anything in those options, is it a quick win? Does something have high impact? Is a certain option are people uncertain about, so on and so forth. So you would then put that on a prioritization matrix, and then you would test out those solutions. So some questions that you could sort of think about is similar to the questions that we asked you in the chat. Are there certain status quo organizational norms that exist currently? What would you need to know before you are experimenting? Right? What approaches for change would work best? And you collect these insights by, again, talking to people, gathering surveys, talking to the stakeholders in this exercise. This is an example of a real change management exercise that was conducted. And so they put it on a prioritization matrix of sorts, and then they went about selecting an option to test out. So how would you go about then creating experiments from these options? So the insight that was generated, again, this is a hypothetical example, but an insight that was generated was they need leadership buy-in for lean processes. And the option was maybe standardization of processes will give leader more confidence in this process. Certain hypotheses. So, like they were like, we hypothesized by implementing this process standardization, it will lead to a 30% increase in leaders' confidence. And then they plot it on a prioritization matrix, let's call it. In this case, it's a zone chart. So an experimental zone is something that we are not very sure about or uncertain about what the results would be, but it's still in that area of it's not huge enough or a highly uncertain zone, but good enough to be tested out with a smaller pilot of a team and sorts. And this is another, so this is again something that Bree mentioned when you're checking for alignment. This is a small little easy example of introducing free coffee. So it's a strategic change canvas. The vision for the organization over here was maybe establishing a free coffee service in the office would enhance employee satisfaction, foster a positive work environment. And why was this change important to the organization? Because they thought like this is a small but very significant gesture that can improve employee morale, foster a sense of community amongst the team members. And then they thought about, okay, how do we go about measuring success? So they were like, okay, a few metrics that you can think about is employee satisfaction surveys, either before or after implementing this change. Maybe checking out how many times the cafeteria was used, and potentially improved productivity metrics as lagging indicators. So they've filled out this change canvas. They made it visible to the team, got a whole lot of insights and options, and then they iterated upon the change canvas and had some metrics in place to think about how would they go about introducing this free coffee. So both of these blank templates and the procedure for hot seat are available to you. Feel free to use them when you're thinking of certain change initiatives that you would like to implement within the team. I'll not talk about like a hypothetical example. So I'll sort of bring together all of the four different aspects of lean change management principles that you have heard, and how did one particular ministry, so in this case, a ministry of change, is undergoing a major policy shift. This particular ministry wants to focus assistance funds towards helping small businesses. Businesses with employees over 100 will no longer be eligible to access the business change assistance program. So what did they go about doing? They used the lean change management principles. So the change agent scheduled certain focus groups with employees across the ministries to gather insights regarding the portfolio structure, what worked well previously, any concerns and excitements about the portfolio changes. Then second, they went about very meticulously evaluating the insights using, again, the cost and value prioritization matrix to create options. The options identified as low cost, low effort, but of high value were implemented right away and communicated with all of the ministry employees. Options that are high cost, high value are temporarily parked for consideration for the third quarter. Thirdly, if the options that were medium cost, high value, additional focus groups were scheduled. Some options that the employees were not aligned with were parked. The options that everyone is aligned with moves forward. The task groups are created for each option to be tested through experiments. And fourthly, task groups work on designing experiments and completing tests on different portfolio changes. The results of these tests, based on whatever the measurement criteria they used, created this data-driven policy of like inform them about rapid iterations, where iterations having broader ministry-wide impact. The leadership is informed of the iteration change, and the task force, again, with a bottom-up approach, is sort of empowered to implement the iteration quickly. So this sort of summarizes about how these different aspects could be actually used in a real world scenario when it comes to thinking about change management with a lean lens. I'll now hand it off to Bree to conclude our session.
Okay, so we're moving into our wrap up now, and we want to have time for the Q&A and discussion. Essentially, what we really want to leave you with is this notion of experimental mindset and making changes through experimentation. So this approach helps to consider the potential impact on those who may not immediately understand the changes and how they might react. So even minor adjustments can sometimes elicit unexpected responses. And so that's why it's crucial to treat changes as experiments, like Iwan was describing. So if people know something isn't necessarily permanent or is absolutely the new way that things are going to be done, that can increase their openness to trying and seeing how things go. And it also acknowledges that you know that the experiment could fail, and that's okay. You use that as data to adjust and kind of make iterations on your change. So this mindset helps and enables both change agents and those affected by the changes to feel more at ease when there's uncertainty as well. So we really encourage embracing that experimental mindset through lean change management. Oh, so then this is our call to action. We want to invite you to, again, you adopt that title of lean change agent. It can be anyone. It doesn't have to be someone who's necessarily trained in lean or have a black belt. As long as you have an understanding of the lean change management cycle and again, that mentality of experimentation, you can go ahead and use one of the tools that we have in this slide deck to gather insights, generate options, and then set up those experiments once you have alignment across everyone who's affected. So as a refresher, here are the 4 stages of the lean change management cycle. And you can move between the phases as well. You don't necessarily move through them linearly, but generally you tend to follow the pattern of insights, options, alignment, and then experiments. And that is essentially our message that we have for today. We've provided our contact emails there, so feel free to reach out to us. We love talking about everything lean and change management as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bree and Iwan. That was awesome. And we do have a couple questions in here. So Whitney says, apologies if I missed this, but for the alignment stage, how do we best interact with the folks identified as movers, movable, and immovables to gain and keep buy-in?
I can take that, Iwan, if you want. So yeah, it's really about engaging all those people in conversations. So you can use group conversations, focus groups. Sometimes, especially with the movables, one-on-one conversations are more helpful if people tend to be a bit more hesitant to engage in a group setting. You can also use asynchronous methods. So this means things that people like surveys or If you have an in-office option, having like paper on a wall for people to leave sticky notes to generate ideas. Those are things that kind of meet people where they're at so that they can contribute on their own time when they're ready at their own pace, kind of thing. So, yeah, there are different methods that you can use in order to engage all of those different personas.
I'd like to add on to that. So, if you have identified the movables, so there are movers who are like readily acceptable and fully on board with the change initiative, but then you have also have like movables who are sort of not sure if the change initiative will work or not. Uh, but they can be persuaded to support it. And then you sort of talk to them and understand like where that blocker lies. Because once you sort of address that blocker, you sort of convert, in most of the cases, the movables convert into your best change champions. So once they are sort of they change their mind, they sort of help gather the rest of the team around that idea. So trying to again like to think about what's motivating certain blockers and then addressing that helps usually in most of the cases. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Yes. And would you consider the immovables as folks who are just flat out resistant?
Yes, absolutely.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so we have a couple questions with that theme for suggestions to get buy-in from folks that are just flat out resistant and immovable. Would it be to try to get them to the neutral point, or what would your suggestion be for those folks?
I can take that. So again, with immovables, like at their best, so they pick the change apart to hopefully make it better, and hopefully again provide a reason and logic behind why they think or why are they resisting. So again, it comes down to thinking about like how much, so in a group of stakeholders you would have mostly movers and movables, and certain immovables as well, and depending on how much effort would you like to put in to like convert them, that's sort of up to y'all to decide, as in like the change agents. We sort of tend to say focus more on the movers and the movables. Those are like the largest uh, percentage of your stakeholders, hopefully. If not, try to understand what's the blocker behind the resistors and see if you can address that.
Got it. Thank you. And then the last question I'll say, I'm going to combine two here because it's around the theme of the experiment. So the first part of this question is there a set time frame for how long an experiment can or should last? Is there like a general consensus that works best? So that pertains to the time frame of the experiment. And then the part two of that question, this person is saying experimentation can create its own type of fear in people, especially when dealing with public perception. How would you calm public perception about an experimental approach and help them understand how it benefits them? So the first part of the question is there a general consensus on a time frame for experimentation? And then how would you calm the public perception who might be fearful of experimentation?
Yeah, for sure. I think the time frame really depends on the change that's being measured. So it's hard to say like a general rule of thumb. Um, yeah, so for like example, so we as an organization just came up with a new internal lean black belt certification program. So we are piloting this program, but we're understanding that the pilot is going to take over the course of a couple months, a few months at least. So that is a different kind of change that's being experimented as opposed to something that's more smaller scale that could maybe be experimented over the course of 1 week. So it really comes down to, I think, the scale of change that you're testing out. Who's being impacted? Is it just your team? Or is it more across your department or ministry, and that can inform the timeline ultimately.
Wonderful. Thank you. Iwan, did you want to add to that or you
No,
good?
again, comes down to scope management. So you have like a whole list of experiments that you put it on a prioritization matrix. You could add in a third axis to those cost versus value. You could add in time as well and see what lies at the bottom part, right? Like you could be like time from like, I don't know, 0 weeks to 52 weeks. And then slowly, steadily sort of move towards whatever based on your resources and time availability, move towards options generated that are towards the higher end of stuff. It's not to be like discouraged or something, but like you'll have to go up to that. But like again, depends on how much resources you can allot to that, basically.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for this great presentation. We also want to thank our ASL interpreter, Kelly Brunson, and our CART captioner, Adriana Torres. Big thank you to everyone who joined us this morning for this session. There is a lot more of the conference to come, so feel free and visit our website at results.wa.gov. There you can visit sessions that you might have missed, sessions if you want to rewatch them again. We will again be uploading the recording within a week, so you'll be able to see that. And then you can also download copies of presenter materials there and sign up for additional sessions if you haven't signed up for all the ones you want yet. You'll soon see a survey pop up, so please take a moment to complete that. We really appreciate your feedback, and we hope to see you more throughout the conference. Thank you all again for attending.
Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
us. Bye.
Bye.